Hi, I'm Donna Jordan from Jordan Fabrics. Today I'm going to show you how to make a rail fence from a jelly roll. A rail fence with an accent. So let's pick out a jelly roll and get started. We're going to use a pre-cut jelly roll from Moda Fabrics. This is made from ombre metallic fabrics. These are really cool. This is the fabrics. All of these bolts, they vary in color, dark to light and then back to dark. They've got these wonderful dots, some of which are metallic. So let's open this up, see what all the colors look like, and pick the accent. I'm going to open up the package here so I can see what the colors look like, because you can't always tell from just the outside of the jelly roll. So let's unroll it a little bit, and then we get a much better idea of the colors. This has just a lot of fun colors. So let's fan this out and get an idea of the colors. So the darker parts of every strip seem to be down at this end, but that gives us a good idea. So I think I'm going to use an almost solid or a grunge for the accent. The grunge fabrics from Moda, they are almost solids, but they're purposefully distressed a little bit. So you can see either a little shading or sometimes a little bit of a different color. We've got a little purple, a little bit of pink here. So I use these where you might use a solid because they have a little more detail, a little more going on, and it doesn't sit as flat as a solid might. So I'm going to pull a couple colors out. I want something in the medium tones. That might work. This blue might work. If I was going to go with a solid, this one would work real well. I'm trying to get something in the middle. If I go with a really dark black, it's going to pop too much. So I just want a little bit of color. And here's another one that would look pretty good, that green. I think that's what I'm going to go with. All we need is one jelly roll and 1 yard of fabric. I've got mine, you grab yours, and let's get started. The first thing we need to do is to cut our accent fabric. So I need 24 strips that are 1 inch wide. So I'm going to cut some off the bolt here and iron it up so I can cut it nice and accurately. I'm going to be cutting 4 layers of fabric here. If you only like to cut 2, that's okay. Or if you like to cut 8, that's okay. It's a matter of personal preference. Now I do find that putting a weight up there really helps. So I'm lining up my ruler with the grid that's on the cutting board. And that weight really helps keep it nice and neat, nice and straight, without moving. So I'm going to cut these 1 inch because we just want a little bit of accent showing. Now these 1 inch strips are going to be put between our jelly roll strips. So we need to sort these strips so that we have a nice blend of colors. So our rail fence today is going to have 3 strips. So I'm going to start sorting these into darks, mediums, and lights so I can pick out 3 strips and put it with 2 of these guys, and then we're going to make a strip unit. So let me show you. I'm going to pick a dark, and then I'm going to pick a medium, and then I'm going to pick one of the light ones. So I'm going to have a strip unit that's going to look like this, and then we're going to cut that into squares, and those will be our rail fences. So I'm going to sort all my colors first. I've sorted all my strips, so I've got 3 in each group, and I just threw one of these accent colors on top to make sure I like the accent with everything. I need to use 36 strips, and my jelly roll had 40, so there's 2 of them I'm not going to use. I didn't really like this color green with the accent, and this one is pretty close to the accent, so that won't show very well. So now we're going to take these groups and we're going to stitch them into a strip unit. Now your groups may look completely different because every jelly roll is different, but try to get a darker and a medium and a lighter, if possible, for every group that you have. Before we stitch these up, I want to give you a couple of hints about the pinked edges on these jelly roll strips. So Moda cuts theirs with a pinked edge. Most of the manufacturers cut them with this small pinked edge. But you can always put it up against your ruler. You can see what they're doing is they're measuring the 2.5 inches from the innermost part of the pinked edge. So you always get the full 2.5 inches. So when you put a strip on here that's not pinked, you can just put it right along the narrowest, the inside parts of the little pinked, and it will come out straight and you will get your full 2.5 inches. So we're going to lay the green accent right on the inside of those pinked edges, and we're going to sew a 1/4 inch from the edge of the accent, which is also a 1/4 inch from the innermost edges of that jagged cut. Now when you sew strip units like this, try to not stretch either one. Just lay them right out smoothly, one on top of the other, and then stitch. I don't have trouble with mine bowing, but if you do, you can stitch your first seam this way and your next seam the other way, and then your next seam that way. You can alternate. Now I'm going to finger press this. I'm going to finger press to the right. I'm going to press all the seams in this unit to the right. So I'm just pulling it open a little and drawing my fingernail or the pad of my finger down along that seam because it makes ironing it easier. Now we're going to stitch the middle piece on, and it's a little bit trickier to get your seam exactly perfect here, but it'll be close enough because these zigzags are going to be hanging off a teeny bit. And you can always flip it around and sew from the other direction. So my presser foot is a 1/4 inch, and so I'm putting that right on the inside of those little jags, and my accent fabric is right on the inside. And that's just going to come out just right. These are so much fun to make. I just love the little accent color in there. And this confetti fabric is kind of ombre. It goes a little bit lighter in the middle, so every block's going to look a little bit different. So since I finger pressed, it's laying pretty flat already. So I'm going to start by just ironing it without steam and pressing it open a little bit, making sure it's nice and flat. And then I'm going to take my straight edge and see how straight I've got it before I steam press it. That's pretty straight there, even though I knocked it a little with the yardstick there. It's pretty straight. So now I'm going to add the steam and get it really, really flat. Now the strip unit should be 7.5 inches. That's what I was hoping for. And mine does look like it's 7.5 inches. If yours comes out a little bit smaller or even a little bit bigger, don't worry about it. But when you cut your blocks out of this, you want to make them as wide as your strip unit came out. So for instance, if yours only came out 7 inches wide, then you're going to want to cut 7-inch blocks. So sew your strip units and double check the size before you cut the blocks. I'm going to just cut them one at a time here, 7.5 inches. And I will get 5 of them out of this unit. And then I'm going to stitch everything else up. Cut them all. So I'll show you what the block looks like. Very cool. So those are going to be what our rail fence is going to look like. I have all of my blocks cut out now, and I started laying out the quilt and twisting things around till I have a really nice layout. Now, my jelly roll was a little more challenging because it's a lot of different colors. Most jelly rolls have a theme, and you'll have half of them green and half of them cream, or a third green, a third red, a third cream. It's a little bit easier. Mine was a little challenged so that I could get the nice, strong split rail fence look there. So I had to move things around and try not to get too picky, but I wanted a strong pattern. I also wanted these confetti dots sprinkled throughout. So it's kind of like I've thrown the confetti and it's spread out here and it's spread out there. And there's a little bit less around the edges. And this is really, really fun. So you could also do just a random colorway. Instead of making these strong lines, you could just put your blocks at random and keep moving them around. And again, use your cell phone, make a layout, take a picture, then move them around, take another picture, and that will really help you decide what's going to look best. To get the strong rail fence pattern, you can really see it from this angle. The blocks are only turned two ways. I have the prominent dark one on the right and the prominent dark one on the top. The right and the top. And when you do that, you get that whole continuous line running throughout the quilt. There are different ways to lay out rail fences, but this is the traditional way, and I think this is the strongest layout for this pattern. Now, I don't want my blocks to get mixed up when I sew them together, so I'm going to leave this on the table, and I'm just going to stick a pin in the first block from every row here, and that way I will know as I sew my rows that every row at the beginning is going to have one of these pins in it. Now I'm just going to pick up this one row in order. I'm going to sew this row and then I'm going to lay it right back on the table to make sure I didn't get it flipped around. Here's this row stitched together. And I do like to lay it out, make sure I didn't get anything turned the wrong way. Of course, this row is a little bit shorter now because it's got the seam allowances in it. Now, for the direction of your seam allowances back here, you want to always press it towards this long piece. So this is pressed that way, and this one is pressed that way. Because there's all these seam allowances here, and it wants to go that way. When the whole quilt is done, they will all be alternating because this is going to go this way, this seam here is going to go that way, and that'll make it really easy for me to get these lined up when I sew the rows together. So I'm going to make each row separate, and then I'm going to sew the rows together, and then we'll be ready for borders. This was by far the most fun rail fence variation I've ever made. You can see from here the accent fabric that's between all of those strips. It's subtle, but it unifies it very, very nicely. And the strong rails, they are showing just throughout the whole quilt. Now, there are special things you have to do when you're stitching with those pinked edges, because when you cut your strip units, now you have some pinked edges and some that are not. So I'm going to do something I tell my customers never do this. This is not as straight as most of my stitching is, so if you get up really close, I tell people don't point out the flaws, but I had a lot of trouble matching all of my intersections. Now when you get back, and now that it's quilted, you really can't tell, but I'm just telling you so you're warned. You will get better at stitching those pinked edges. I used the ombre fabric on the border, and it looks really good because we've got dark in some spots and then light in some spots, and I used the same binding and I moved it a little bit, so I've got dark here where this is light, and I've got to show you the back side. I almost like the back of the quilt as much as the front, so I took all the scraps from the strip units and stitched them into a border. So this is the same ombre confetti on the back side here. And these are just the scraps from when we made those strip units. I just sewed them into one long piece. And then remember I had a couple of strips left over. I just cut those down to 1 inch, put it on each side and sandwiched it. And so this is just stuck in where the back would have been seamed anyway. And this is just a great look on the back side. I always like to make my backs interesting, but this one is just really, really fun. I love how there's more dots, less dots, more dots. Just tons of fun. Thanks for watching our tutorial today on the modern rail fence. Now we will have this as a free pattern on our website, so it'll be really easy for you to make your own. Happy quilting!